Hey folks, welcome back. As you can see today, I am jumping in with something that I have never done, I don't think, at least not for any of the other seasons other than autumn. So I figured now might be a fun time. I was looking to attempt a minimised rotation again for the next coming months, and I felt like spring could be a good way to trial that. Also, I've seen quite a few spring deck choices videos popping up, and I've actually really enjoyed them. I feel like I've been craving spring so much, and whilst it is definitely here where I live, the spring flowers have already sprung, as it were, nature is resuming, I am still kind of feeling in that transition phase. And this is one of my ways of invigorating some of my practice around that. Before we jump in, one of the reasons why I've always done full deck videos is because that's very much my aesthetic overall. And a lot of my decks would just naturally fit into that category. It's just one of those things I've always enjoyed. The way that my practice has worked predominantly has meant me just grabbing whatever deck I feel like at whatever time. But in recent years, I've been playing with a few different ways to engage with my decks, spend more time with specific ones. And you know, I have a larger collection, so just getting some rotation in, giving me some space to think about if those particular decks still have a place in my practice and all of that good stuff. So the quick caveat that I will add is that this is my early spring collection. I may not last the entirety of spring, but I do feel that I wanted to simplify things and spend some time with some particular decks. I haven't included a couple of new decks I've literally recently received by friends. I will be exploring those as well, but they have just shot through the door and they wasn't really a part of me thinking about and prepping for this. Again, these are decks based on my personal practice alone. They're not necessarily the only ones that I'm reading for clients with or using with other people in general. So there's kind of all of those layers, but my aim is to predominantly work with the decks that I'm showing you over the next coming months, and they are either decks that kind of feel spring-like to me. I want to say about half of them, and the other half are very reflective of where I'm at, because obviously I want to meet where I'm at with the season that I'm in, with a few non-negotiables that kind of are just, they're getting used. It didn't matter whether they were spring or not, but they will be used in spring. So my spring collection is kind of twofold. By the way, side note, if you hang out to the end, I also thought I would add a little bit of a practice spring plan in at the end of the deck discussion as well, and then finish up. That being said, let's get into it. I think I have around 13 decks. I have actually paired them though, so we're kind of seeing some pairings as well. The first two are kind of my ultimate dynamic duo. I have loved these two together since I've had them both. I have been using them so much more than any other decks I own, and that is the Forest Lore Tarot and the Coastal Curiosities. You may or may not have heard me talk about these two together. I know I haven't been doing monthly wrap-up videos. I will probably return to them at some point, but I don't know how I'm feeling about whether that will be quarterly or whatever. These very much give me spring vibes if I was really going to lay a season on them, or spring to summer. Just the warmer, lighter half of the year where I am. They feel very much that way inclined aesthetically. Mood-wise, I'm wonderfully covered with an array of everything from uplifting to challenging and completely neutral. So that's something that I really enjoy about the two of these. And it's nature. It's nature in its fullness. It's perhaps not as visually challenging as, say, the Brady Tarot, but I had to draw the line at decks somewhere. And since the Forest Lore has come in, I have allowed my Brady Tarot to have a little bit of a rest from being in constant practice. This is totally focused on my region, which is an utter delight for me, because whilst I have Oracle decks that do that, I've struggled to get a tarot that did it. Also, the reason I like the coastals with it is I've noticed that I don't tend to use an animal tarot and an animal oracle together at the same time very commonly. It's not a rule, it's just not something that I do. And whilst these do have animals in almost all of the cards, it doesn't feel like it's in competition. It doesn't feel like a dominating facet. They're very much shared in with the rest of the symbology that's included. And visually, they feel very complementary of each other whilst having different styles. So it's just a lot of things coming together that I enjoy at once. And I feel like these are a very good representation of my practice as well. It's quite funny because I'm not a very colourful person. I wear predominantly a lot of black and khaki green. I don't usually buy colourful decks, and yet these two sing so much to me. They have swiftly moved into like my favourites of all time. Just both really cherished decks. I can't go on about them enough. And so I feel like they have held me in a really good space in the previous season, and now they're really going to come into fruition for spring. The next pairing is very new to me, not deck-wise, but in terms of finally finding a pairing to go together because I wanted one. I will say not all of these pairings that I'm showing together will solely be used together. I might mix and match, but I have selected these specifically because they complement each other's energy and various other things. So I've been trying these two out together, and I'm happy to say that they feel like such a good fit. I do have the guidebook out just very briefly for this one so that you can see the French and I don't ruin the pronunciation. The artist sent me this a long time ago, and I have loved this deck, but always felt like I wanted an oracle to go with it, which I don't always feel like, and just hadn't found one. And I do feel like it's come into its time. It's quite a grungy spring deck, which is interesting, whereas this is quite uplifting. But anyway, the whole idea of sprouting and things blooming just feels so fitting. And the fact that I found the Roots and Wings Oracle really complemented them, it was a go from there, basically. They're actually both challenging decks to handle, but that's neither here nor there. They're both beautiful cardstock, but for differing reasons, the cardstock is just they get attached to each other a little bit. Oh, the Three of Wands with the healer. I love Snake for that fiery energy and that sort of investing in something and being quite driven. I mean, with snakes, obviously, it's far more of an instinctual thing anyway. Oh, the two, but for the Magician, I love it. We seem to be finding a lot of wands. I can't say much about how these are because it's really fresh. As I say, I have tried it a few times. The Full for Vulnerability, yes. And I really, really love them together. I always forget to do nudity warnings, by the way. My decks have nudity in semi-frequently if they've got people. It seems to be my vibe. The Emperor with the Wish. The Seven of Cups with Breath. Oh, yes. Take a breath before making emotional decisions. Anyway, there is just something about these two that are absolutely singing to each other for me already. Visually, there's a lot of grey in this one, so that's what I mean. It's quite a grungy, really early phase of spring, perhaps even earlier than we're actually in, but that's where my mood is. This feels like a spring into summer kind of vibe if I'm going on aesthetic, but also if I'm going on some of the offerings and keywords and just the energy sort of collaboration that I have. So I feel like they're a really good meeting in the middle for me. Three of Swords and the Moon. Oh, Are they not just looking grand together? It's a whole vibe. I'm really loving it. I'm quite excited to share more about these two together after I've spent more time with them. And as I say, when I say spent more time with them, I mean as a coupling, as opposed to never having used them, because they've been in my collection a while, especially this one. The next pairing is Fae base, and that is because the Fae have been calling to me quite a bit, and this is a representation of wanting to steep myself into more of that practice again. Now I'm more established at our new place and I've got a few things settled. We have the renowned Faeries Oracle by 𝗵𝘁𝗀𝗺. I do have the other out of print one as well, but this is my favourite. And this is the only one I'm pulling out for the time being. And then the Victorian Faeries Tarot. The Fae here have such a big energy and a bold energy and a demand, I feel, to really have that presence when I'm working with them. That the Victorian Faeries, being a lot more sort of cute in its depiction and human, a bit more familiar in our reality, as it were, as opposed to 𝗵𝘁𝗺𝗺's Fae, who feel eternally otherworldly. I like to pull one of the Faeries Oracle as like a focal point and then carry on the conversation with the Victorian Faeries Tarot. So that's kind of the aim with these two. And obviously I'm just showing you a card from each, but how many I pull from one and the other will just vary as my practice sort of unfolds. These two feel very reflective of each other, don't they? So it's not necessarily that these look spring. There are some fun decks that I've shown you already that do look very springy, as in how I see spring. This deck is actually got the entire of the seasons in it, as you can see, because it's seasonally themed. And this one, I'm not going to lie, if someone said to me, what does it make you feel like? It looks very autumnal. It's probably just the borders, I don't know. But in terms of working with these energies, that's mostly year round. It does taper off in the winter, I'm going to be honest. Everything just feels quiet. I just hibernate. But certainly from spring all the way until early winter, these feel like energies that I want to engage with, and it's time. Next up, we have decks that definitely don't have an aesthetic spring vibe, nor an energetic one, but these are kind of where I'm at. This is not quite a non-negotiable, as in it's not a year-round, because the Somina Tarot is still somewhat newer to me, and the Here and Now I've had under a year. They are very much reflective of some of the work that I'm doing in my private practice and where I'm at. And just, yeah, I mean, this whole dreamscape world just feels like a space that I need to explore right now as well, and maybe bring me out of the wintry transition into the spring one more in fullness. So it kind of meets me where I'm at. I will probably pull, 3 of these or 2 of them or several when I'm using them with the Somnia. I will use this on its own with the Somnia, whatever, but they go together quite well. The thing is with the Somnia is I'm really picky about what oracles that I use with it, because it feels like a particularly chatty, deep invitation into tarot in particular. It's an interesting one. It must just be the visuals and the mood, but it certainly just feels chattier, or there's something about it that really taps into that part of me. I could really get into just one singular card, which sometimes I can't always do with tarots, and just talk about its sheer vastness. And because of that, I've had a bit of a time putting oracles with it, and I don't have to, but I was feeling the urge with this one. And what I realised is that my mushroom oracle works amazingly with it, but the mushrooms just weren't feeling very spring to me at the moment, and I'm sort of holding out for them releasing their flower version of that. Or perhaps I should get the seashell one. I don't know. I've been thinking on it. But anyway, the Here and Now feels perfect. I wanted to do some of this word association stuff. I like to think of myself as a bit of a word witch anyway. And then one of the other decks that I can and have used it with, although we're talking big energy at this stage, for me anyway, my other non-negotiable, so I'm just going to pop that in too, which is the Memento Mori Oracle. This is ultimate non-negotiable. Mostly this will be used on its own for spirit communication, for ritual, for all of the things that I'm always going on about. But my dear friend Vanessa had said to me, oh, these two speak really beautifully together for me. Have you tried them? And so I did. I tried it with this. I tried it with the Oracle of Oddities, which of course, same creator. And basically any of her decks. And they seem to hold a really compatible energy for me. It might not visually work for you. I don't know. It's an interesting one. Like visually, I don't go, oh yes, these were made for each other. But at the same time, they speak to each other in a way that just instantly makes sense to me. I'm just mindful when I use them together how many cards that I pull of each. But yeah, this is a non-negotiable. I wanted to, whilst I'm honouring spring, I wanted to really show what I would definitely be using still. And this has a bit of everything in it. This is seasonally varied because, of course, it's a representation of practice, and therefore that makes total sense to me. And if I want to, I can even adapt to the deck and make it more spring focused if I wish. At the moment, I've got some cards taken out of it just because I've got all of the expansions and it's huge. The next pairing is because I don't want to repeat one of the other decks, and I think that this will get some use. It's not necessarily so much of a seasonal representation for me as it is, again, an all year. I always work with animals, but the animals do start to show themselves more in spring. Also, a lot more of the plants come back. So the mixture of the two in this, which is the Woodland Wardens Oracle, feels like it makes sense. And then this is the Antique Anatomy Tarot. And I'd never really thought about seeing a season in it, but I think it's the blooms. And like I said, early spring especially, it still reminds me of the death and decay that sort of had to occur metaphorically or actually in the winter period to kind of feed that spring nourishment and ensure that the cycle continues. I work with the Woodland Wardens quite a bit, even if it's just a representation of our monthly animal on my Patreon. So again, it's going to see use anyway. But I thought that they felt like quite a nice pairing together. I'll be honest, I don't pay as much attention to the plant in the Woodland Wardens as some people do. I do tend to focus predominantly on the animal. I suppose in that sense, I'm somewhat treating the flowers the same in both decks. I will, if I'm familiar with it and I have a connection with the plant, consider it in a greater way, but it's kind of an as and when. But I needed a pippish deck. This one sprung to mind. It's always on my altar anyway. It's actually in these cute little drawers off to the right. Yeah, I like my pip-ish pip decks. I don't know. It's not pippish, it is pips, it's just not a 𝗪𝗂𝗁. You get what I mean. And I feel like these two would be lovely together, but I also would happily use this with the Coastal Curiosities. I haven't tried, so that's just putting that out there. These pairings are actually, with this one, quite fresh. But the Antique Anatomy Tarot basically pairs with everything, in my experience, because of how it reads. Oh, I like the colours syncing up here. We've got the Three of Wands. We stopped on that earlier. And we've got the Ladybug and Sweet Pea, which is happiness. Like when I'm really in that energy and it's sort of vibrating through me, I do feel very happy with myself. I feel like I'm being productive or proactive or I'm feeling kind of a mix of inspired and wistful and all of the things at once. It's quite an energised experience. So I can see Ladybug for that. It's weird calling it Ladybug because we call them Ladybird over here. But other than that. And then just quickly, before we move into the other little add-on about a practice or two that I want to do, this is the final deck. Technically I'm working with another one, but I will mention that in the following bit. I've really been feeling inclined to pull this back out. I hadn't worked with it too much. This is a Compendium of Witches, and it does feel like two decks because, as anyone who owns it knows, you've got the witch cards or archetypal individuals, whatever you want to call them, and then you've got the more symbolic practice-based, tool-based selection, and you can literally split the deck. For a while I was having the best luck and I was shuffling and only ever pulling one witch and then getting these tool cards, but my luck changed. So when I pull more than a couple of these, it just feels like too much, so I will probably split the deck at some point. And just, yeah, make sure, basically I want to pull, like I said, one witch and then 2 or 3 of the others. I would probably maybe even chuck in a few of the here and now oracles. One of the reasons I think I've been feeling the urge to work with this is you can sort of see some of the layers in some of the other decks I've chose. This, whilst it's not the same as a Memento and it's not the same as a Coastal Curiosities, it has that kind of nature, tool, practice. Like I said, how many times can I repeat those words? It has that kind of vibe to it, and I feel like my practice in that way is picking up a little bit more again. I'm feeling a little bit less hermity, although it is a struggle. And whilst I'm not sure that I would coin all of this seasonally as that way, the witches just feel continuously appropriate to me no matter where the season is. And visually the tools and places, it's got that nice spacious feeling. And I feel like the complement between the two work very well because these are a little busier. And I think looking at some of my decks, it's quite a mixture actually between busyness and spaciousness. And I think that's because in the summer, I, by that point, have established myself into it feeling busier and feeling fuller. But especially in the early moments of spring, I'm just trying to reintroduce myself to that. And a lot of the decks I've chose sort of meet me in that space, even if it's that some of them are more like it than the others. So yeah, I've been feeling very inclined to this. And if people didn't know, I got this before I got the Weaver's Oracle because it was very affordable, mass market, easy to get, and I was really curious how I'd work with that kind of representation of an archetype. The decks are nothing like each other, but the experiment itself worked because that's really what it was. And actually I can read this one quite quickly. These are not necessarily messages that I sit on for the longest time. Maybe I'll still sit with it for a couple of days, even a week. It really depends what kind of workings I'm doing. But in the same vein, I could definitely pull one of these and 2 of these a day if I wanted to. I don't, but it feels really quick and accessible in a way that the Weaver's does not. So that's all the decks. If you got this far, thank you for hanging out. And quickly, I just thought I would add in a couple of other focuses that I've got going on in the background because, as I said, I haven't been doing practice, reflection, monthly wrap-up type videos. Let me know if you missed them. I don't know. I've been toying with doing a quarterly one, but I suppose I'd have to do it soon because we are now in April officially. But anyway, this is my current weaver who I'm working with, which is only the 2nd weaver that I've ever worked with. If you have been around for some time, You will have seen both my love of creating aesthetically pleasing things, anything from, collage, journal art, to just the pictures that I share on Instagram. And then over the years, as my conditions and my pain and stuff has worsened, that has got less and less. So I've often said I love seeing other people's journals and all of the really cool things that they put in them and they do, but actually it's quite taxing on my body and creates a significant amount of pain to do things like that regularly. So I've got a lot of unfinished journals where that's been a part of it. And also when I get a journal, I've been too rigid with, okay, so it's going to be specifically for this tarot exploration, or it's going to be for dream work, or insert whatever part of practice. And that doesn't work for me either, especially because I can't do it regularly because of the pain. So I couldn't keep up with it even if I wanted to. It's not realistic. All of my journaling, from tarot readings to poetry to bibliomancy, you name it, all exist on a very unorganised, somewhat, it's kind of semi-organised journal on my computer, because thankfully typing doesn't affect me. I don't get the same issues that I get with any other kind of sort of actual art and crafts. So thankfully that's where it is. But I never really got into the creative aspect of digital journaling. It is just type and write and be done with it. I tried it, it wasn't for me. I'm very happy with that stuff. It would cost me an absolute fortune to print it all out. And so the likelihood is most of it will just stay on a computer forever. And I was really craving the urge to have a physical journal again and wondering how I could support myself doing that. And certainly there's been a lot of people who share their journals online who have inspired me, but specifically Cody from Tarot Readings from 𝗵𝘁𝗄𝗏. When I have seen hers over the years of her having a YouTube, I've just really felt compelled to get into it again. I'm sure that she does it with regularity because I know it's like moon stuff and other things that she does every month. But there's something about the way that she talked about it and presented it that was reminding me to kind of be a bit more accessible with myself again. So thank you to Cody. And my partner and I were out and he saw this journal and wanted to get it for me. So we got this beautiful journal. I have only ever had one like this ever, and it's actually on my altar and it's partially filled. So what I have done with this, and I have literally only just started this, so I wanted to kind of also put this in as like a spring intention, and it's something that I can check back on when summer hits and see how I've done. I've left, I think, about 3 or 4 pages in the beginning. I'm terrible at starting journals. I do struggle with perfectionism. It has spoiled a lot of my creativity over the years in terms of enjoyment of it. And it's just an issue that I need dealing with. But also I left these because I wanted to, if I get anywhere near filling this, because it's thick, then perhaps I'll just write down not contents as in page numbers, but like kind of things that are in it. And I've got space to do that. Now, how do I show this? Because I'm not going to share everything I've journaled. Believe it or not, this took 2 sittings. I don't want to explain what's wrong with my body and bore everyone. Needless to say, just trust me when I say my body, it responds to very simple things in really unreasonable ways in terms of pain. So the first day I did the watercolour on the pages, I printed off my picture, wrote this, did my little stamping, which I was really happy to actually stamp. If you're curious, this sticker photo I printed on my, it's a little Canon printer. I think in America it's called like a Canon 𝗪𝗍𝗍, but over here it's got a different name. Anyway, they're tiny little printers. They're quite easy to find online. I also drew this little snake and then cut them out with a craft knife and stuck them on because it's relevant to this particular weaver. I didn't want to write realms about this one in particular because it hasn't really been that way, and perhaps if I do a ritual with this one, which I did with the first one I worked with, then I'll add that in the following pages. But it felt really good to do something, and these snippets are actually bits that are out of the book that really called to me for this particular time or felt relevant to like the work I was doing. And that's literally it. Those are the 2 pages in this thick book. The plan is to have anything and everything in here. If I do some bibliomancy, if I write a poem, perhaps if I read just an awesome poem that really hits online, obviously quoting whoever created it. If I want to collage one day and just stick stickers on a page because I'm sore and that's all I can do. Recipes, rituals, spells. So I don't really want to call it like a grimoire or whatever, because I suppose it's just a real slapdash of even more things than some people might include in that. But loosely, it's like a journal meets magical book meets me and my practice. And the great thing about that is if I don't come to this for another 3 weeks and then I randomly put something completely different in it, I have genuinely mentally associated this book with that already. Between leaving the pages at the front and doing that, it's just an allowance that I should have made myself years ago. And yeah, I'm pretty excited. I'm not going to make it any prettier than it is either, which is possibly still quite cute to some people. I know that most of my journals were just written and there was loads of scribbling on them. That's still very cute for me. But I get over ambitious. My body can't keep up with it. It's just one of those weird places where I miss that level of creativity, but I can't do it. So this is a workaround. And this is my spring practice commitment to myself to put some of that stuff in here. I'll still predominantly be using my computer. But I thought it might be interesting to share like my main spring focus. I'm also actually learning playing cards because we're doing a book club over on my Patreon, which runs through the bulk of spring now. I'm participating in 𝗪𝗁𝗄𝗏𝗺's book club as well because, you know, you can never give yourself too many things to do. But I love Claire and I love her book of seances. So I am reading Cartomancy again by Roger J. Horne. It's not called again, I'm reading it again. And I am rereading or reading the bits that I hadn't already read, Claire's book of seances. That's kind of the bulk of my practice, other than just continuing to do the things that I do and, yeah, engage a little bit more on YouTube, hopefully. That's the aim. That's one of the things I'm trying, so we shall see. But I'd love to hear from you. What are your spring decks? If you're in spring, I appreciate not everyone's in the Northern Hemisphere. If you want to share your autumn ones, I am all for it. Are there any practices that are coming in and that are new that you want to talk about? Otherwise, thank you for hanging out with me. Hopefully this wasn't too long and it was fun to watch, and I'll see you all again in the next one. Bye.